Okay, we're getting ready to go live here. We're streaming, and the radio show will start after the news. So, I'm going to talk about a little bit of medicine, a little bit of Second and 14th Amendment, a little bit about when life begins biologically. See if we can stir things up some here. Get the folks awake and arguing. That's always fun, don't you think? Good morning. This is Dr. Bill, your radio MD. We're doing a radio show this morning. I got Ken back by my side. I had Joe last week. Everybody loves Joe, but he is a chatty one, isn't he? That boy can talk and talk and talk. Organizationally, he is. I don't know how he keeps that radio station running. Oh my gosh. I mean, he's there like day and night. I think he lives about a half a block away and has a bridge that he built for himself to get there. He dug a tunnel, yeah, and he burrows right in. At any rate, it's good to have you back, and I hope everybody had a good Father's Day. And Juneteenth, don't forget about Juneteenth. That was, what, last Monday, huh? Uh, yeah, yeah, and oh boy, another day off. Well, not for me, but for other folks, they get a day off. So, so Ken was asking me about this new immunotherapy that cured, I think, up to 14 people with rectal cancer. And rectal cancer is relatively easy to treat if you catch it early, but this immunotherapy is remarkable because it doesn't require any chemotherapy and it doesn't require any radiation. We usually use chemo and then external beam radiation, or vice versa. I forget how the oncologists do it. But rectal cancer used to be a fatal disease. And now with this immunotherapy, apparently they have monoclonal antibodies. I'm just guessing at this because I haven't seen or read the paper yet, Ken. But I'm guessing that these antibodies are directed at the abnormal tumor cells, and there's a genetic defect that now can be screened for that makes you susceptible to rectal cancers. And that's not new. We've known that there are genetic defects that predispose to a number of cancers over the years. So we're we're not making any great breaking news there, but the fact that we were able to make a monoclonal antibody in the lab that will directly attack these cancer cells that are genetically defective, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, buddy. Well, yeah, well, the whole monoclonal antibody therapy and the immunotherapies, the biologics, that they're changing medicine. I mean, look at my migraines. I'm taking medications that a monoclonal antibody injection once a month that targets the receptor sites for the uh, calcitonin gene-like protein that apparently it's not calcitonin, it's a calcitonin gene-like uh, chemical that attaches to the lining of the brain and triggers the migraine headaches. And so if you block that uh, site from the ability for that protein to attach, or you attach something to that protein that has it removed from the system, you've done a great service to migraineurs, people with migraine headaches. And we're using it in a host of things. We had a lady, she just passed away recently in the practice. I diagnosed her 2.5 years ago with acute myelocytic leukemia, which is an adult form of leukemia that's almost uniformly fatal. And she was expected to last a year, and we kept her going for 2.5 years, Ken, because of immunotherapies, new therapies that are out. So there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope, and I had a patient come back to me last week. She said she had been diagnosed with cancer of the lung, and I said, "I didn't know you were a smoker." She said, "I'm not. Maybe I smoked, for a year or two when I was a teenager, but that was it." And of course, she'll have some genetic predisposition. And she said, "I came back because I wanted to die with you, Dr. Bill, because your humor and your upbeat and all that. I want to go laughing." you know, I said, "Well, I appreciate that, but we also want to keep you alive because you never know what immunotherapies are coming down the pike that might cure you." So there's more hope than ever, Ken. More hope than ever. Well, well, then we'll just have to cannibalize small children and get a little. Yeah, they started off with four, and then I think they expanded it to 14. But the amazing thing is that all of them were cured. So that's unusual for even a small study. So this study will expand, and we'll see what happens. It should be very hopeful for people with colon cancer, because rectal cancers or squamous cell colon cancers are they're a different type of cancer. Generally, they're adenocarcinomas, which are more like glandular tissue. But if we can identify the genetic defect in squamous cell rectal cancers, maybe we can do it next with the adenocarcinomas in the colon. Pretty cool. And colon cancer is still one of the big killers. Of course, lung cancer stays at the top, especially in bad little boys who smoke. No, no, Ken. Nobody I can see. I'm, yeah, yeah. Well, but I do talk to someone on the radio every week that tends to pique my interest in that. I know. You keep at it, buddy. I'm not giving up on you yet. But remember, if it wasn't for tobacco and alcohol, I probably wouldn't be making a living. It's, I need vices, dude. Give them up, but don't do it all at once, everybody. So, Detroit 3-year-old found dead in freezer, and apparently Child Protective Services were called to the home over a dozen times, and the family wouldn't let them in. Uh, the child apparently had been in the freezer for a while because it was starting to decompose. So, I think they killed him and then put him in there. You got the picture? Which goes back to what I've been saying about we need to identify early when these kids come to pre-K who's going to be the sociopaths and have the major psychiatric problems, and let's start intervening in those homes now so we don't have these boys going out and mass murdering, and we don't have these girls going out and having a bunch of babies and then abusing them so that then they make mass murderers. So we need to get in there early. I'm glad to see that this new gun bill has some money for mental health, but I'm not quite sure how that'll be directed. They need to talk to me before they spend any money so we can set this up appropriately, but I don't think that's going to happen, Ken. That's true. Then we had an Arizona homeowner fatally shoot two intruders out on his front yard, and the neighbors say he was defending himself. It was self-defense, so he's probably going to get out of that one. Two. There you go. There you go, my friend. All right, so we had a lot of action this week and last week at the Supreme Court, and then a lot of riots going on. I know everybody's sick of hearing about it, but the big to-do is over the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, let me give you a little history. After slavery was abolished by the Emancipation Proclamation, essentially an executive order, which really didn't hold water because the president can't change the Constitution, and the Constitution did not specifically outlaw slavery or indentured servitude. Lincoln started petitioning the Congress and the states to enact the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery and indentured servitude in the United States, and that was passed. And he barely got that through by the skin of his teeth. He was quite a politician and quite a wheeler dealer. We think of him as this really honorable, glorious figure that sits on a high chair at the end of the reflecting pool opposite the Capitol, but he was quite a wheeler dealer. He was a heck of a lawyer too. He cut his teeth traveling all over the Midwest. What is Midwest to us now? That was the West then. Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, trying cases, all kinds of cases, and he he really learned his trade well, and he knew how to handle people. Did a good job. He got it through. Well, after the 13th Amendment came along, then everybody said, well, wait a minute. The amendments apply to the federals only. It doesn't apply necessarily to the states unless the states are specifically named in it. And so how are we going to enforce this? I mean, we can free the slaves, but then will they have any rights? And so that became a battle cry. And so in 1868, we passed the 14th Amendment, which said that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge means, cut into the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So this expanded the federal government's control over the states and gave the federal government the ability to step in and say, look, this is a federal law and you're going to have to implement it in your state. And your state laws have to come into conformity with certain federal laws. And so these have been the big debates, Ken, over the past 150 years, is how much power does the federal government have in overriding the states, and what rights do the states retain? Because part of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, says that those powers that were not enumerated in the Constitution for the federal government belong to the state. So we've got this battle going on, state versus federal. Not new, not new. Now in the 19th century, there was a lot of fighting over this, of course, and there was the courts were trying to define what the federal and what the state powers were, and the idea of the states being semi-independent was called into question and continues to be called into question, and that's why these people are all upset about the overturning Roe versus Wade, because they saw the federal government stepping in and saying to the states, you cannot implement laws which prohibit abortion because of the 14th Amendment. And so now the court says, well, wait a minute. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights does not enumerate that as a right. And so then the other side is pushing back and saying, well, don't we have a right to our own bodies, to our liberties, our happiness, our own decisions? And so we can see how the debate is going, but then we get into the debate of, as you have pointed out in the past, is when does life begin? Is a fertilized ovum, egg, is that alive? Is it a living organism? Well, of course, the people on the left are going to say, no, it's a parasite. Well, when the baby's born, Ken, and you're nursing the baby, isn't that a parasite still? And are we not parasites on other animals and plants? We have to have calories and protein and fat and carbohydrates to live. Where do we get those? We don't get them from rocks. So, I mean, basically, and then there's organisms inside of us. There's microorganisms, bacteria that live in our mouth, in our gut, on our skin. They're parasites on us. So, make it a cold one, dude. Don't forget to take your cigarettes out of your top pocket. So, the whole idea of there being a parasitic relationship between mother and embryo or fetus or child is really biologically flawed, because in some sense or another we're all parasites. We're all parasites on each other, and so the central idea of a natural law of God, which has come to us down through, from the Greeks forward, really, down through, and probably the Egyptians before that in Western culture, has seen us as beings that have reason because we were made in the image of God, if you believe in a God. And St. Thomas Aquinas, he argued this in his famous papers. But let's get away from God. Let's let God work his side of the street. You know, he can have the metaphysical side. Let's look at the physical, Ken. And what is a physiologic definition of life? And this is from the Britannica. Life is defined as any system capable of performing functions such as eating, metabolizing, excreting, breathing, moving, growing, reproducing, and responding to external stimuli. There's no way you can tell me that a fertilized ovum doesn't have some of that ability, Ken. There's just no way. I mean, it is an entity that is responding to its environment. It's feeding, it's replicating, it's dividing and making more cells for itself and growing. And I think that as a physiologic fact, that is a living organism. Now, you'd say, well, what about a virus? Well, a virus can't do that unless it's parasitic in another cell. And it's not a virus in the cell, but it has to be inside of a living cell in order to take advantage of that cell's reproductive abilities to reproduce itself. So it's kind of a proto-life. And the same with these prions, which are small pieces of pre-genetic material that can get into the brains of people and cause things like mad cow disease and multiple sclerosis and different diseases like that. And these are not quote quote living organisms, but once they get inside of a cell, they can manipulate it to do what they want to a certain extent. And then you have to, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a living being, and it doesn't have anything to do with God. It doesn't have anything to do with religion. It has to do with physical, biological, chemical law. I mean, it's just, what are you going to do? Deny the law of gravity? Well, I mean, you can jump as hard as you want, and you might get with a trampoline, you might get 8 or 10 feet up there, but dude, you're coming back down. Now, that doesn't mean you can't escape it. Look, Ken, you can build a rocket ship. Elon Musk has built several, and he can escape pretty much the gravitational pull of the Earth. He can get a ship out there, and he can set up his satellites. Eventually, though, they'll be pulled back in, over hundreds of years, so they'll come. Yeah, and even if you're out between galaxies, you're still subject to that faint pull of gravity from the two galaxies that you're between. So you can't completely escape gravity. You can move against it. You can use energy and force, but you can't deny it. You can't say it doesn't exist, or I'm not going to obey the laws of gravity. Yeah, you are. I mean, come on. You don't have a choice. That's right, and that's why I try not to do that too often, but occasionally I go down. But look, it just doesn't make any sense that people say, well, we can define life at different periods, and Louisiana says life starts at inception, and California says, no, it doesn't start until the kid's weaned. I mean, this is nonsense. How can you have such a broad spectrum of the definition of when a person is a living human being when we can see with the ultrasound, as Dr. Nathanson pointed out in the 1970s, he was the pro-abortion guy, the women's rights guy that led the movement, and they made up all kinds of lies, which he revealed in the book he wrote after he became a right-to-lifer. And you know why he did, Ken? Because of the ultrasound machine. The ultrasound came in and he started looking at these little fetuses and embryos and saying, wait a minute, these are living things. Yeah, they are. They're alive. What are you going to do? Deny that? So you can see the heart beating. You can see the blood moving. You can see it wiggling around. You can see that. You can watch it. Once we get the imaging down pat, you can actually watch these little critters dividing and multiplying and going from a little ball into something that looks like you and me. Well, not me, because I'm old and ugly, but yeah. And if you look at this from a genetic point of view, a fertilized ovum has all the genetic material that you and I have, all of it. I mean, there's no more added or taken away unless we go in there and manipulate it. So, and Darwin, who wrote his famous work on the origin of the species, he said, look, there's genetic mutations that happen, and that's why we have people that are different. That's why we have people with genetic diseases. It's also why we have people that are getting smarter. And believe it or not, the geneticists have shown that we are gradually breeding out the stupid genes. I know it doesn't, not fast enough, not fast enough for Ken. Well, I think you have to differentiate between ignorance and stupid and cultural enculturation and cultural values and morals, which change from time to time. I mean, come on, people at the beginning of the 14th century thought that the plague was, if you got sick, it was because you had been evil and God was punishing you. And then after the plague hit in the 1450s and 1350s and 60s, the kids started saying, wait a minute, clergy died, nuns died, the royalty died, good people died, bad people died. This doesn't have anything to do with God. This has something to do with the ether or the nature of things. And the doctors realized that. Those suits they wore with the big long beaks on it that looked like birds. Have you seen? Those were actually attempts at mask, so that you wouldn't inhale the organism into your lungs and get it. They didn't realize at that time that it was being spread primarily by fleas, and that the bite of the flea was injecting the bacteria into your system. But the doctors actually knew this wasn't an act of God. This is something in nature. Of course, nobody listens to us doctors. We tell people don't smoke, and they just keep on doing it. So what? Yes, it is. And speaking of addiction, I got this out of a dictionary. That the laws in science, like Newton's first law of motion, a thing at rest will stay at rest, and if you kick it and there's no gravity or no friction to stop it, it'll keep going eternally unless it bumps into something. And then Newton's second law said that the time rate of change of the momentum of a body is equal in both magnitude and direction to the force imposed on it. What's that mean? That means that if you're going 50 miles an hour and you step on the gas and put more power into your system, you're going to accelerate. You're going to accelerate, and that acceleration rate is going to be equal to the direction you're going in and how much gas you put into the system. And then we've got gravitational laws. We've got laws of conservation of mass and energy that Einstein clarified for us. They cannot be created or destroyed. So we've got laws here, and that was Newton's. Yeah, that was his fourth. I think it was his fourth. Yeah. After he got busted doing 85. So, good luck defying gravitation. I mean, I think that's just ridiculous. And do we really want a law that says that you can do what you want with your body? I mean, come on, you can't. I can't. Men have to go to war if there's a war and they're called. We have to work. We can't do what we want with our bodies. I don't want to go to work every day and slave away, but the community, the country needs me. I mean, it's paid to train me, and I agreed to take on the role of a doctor. And the country put a lot of time and money into me. The residencies are all funded by Medicare. Did you know that? And a lot of the medical school money comes from the federal government and federal grants and state money. So society has trained me, and they expect me to give something back, and I have that duty and responsibility. And in some cultures, if you don't, you know what? You go to prison. In some cultures, you have to give up 2 or 3 years of your life to perform public service, which is something that we should be doing here. Well, yeah, in South Korea, all the men have to be in the army, too. All the young guys go in the army. And they have one of the largest standing armies in the world. No. So, at any rate, come on, do we want a civil war over whether or not the law of gravity is real? I mean, do we really want to have a civil war over whether or not life begins at conception or whether it begins when the kid's weaned from the breast? This is just nonsense. It's utter. And it was meant at a federal level until the 14th Amendment came along. So the states could have the word God and Christian symbols in their and their flags and their emblems if they wanted. And, the majority of the states did not. Some of the local districts did. And like I said last week, DeLand, Florida, they've got a Christian symbol in their seal. And some group came after them about 10 years ago, and they gave them the bird. And so that group went away and started pestering somebody else. But you have the right to express your opinion within the confines of the law. And if part of that is that you believe in God and you want to say that, you can say that. And if you're on the city council and you want to have a prayer before a meeting, there's nothing in the Constitution that prohibits that, Ken. Come on. Well, he by himself. By himself. By himself, he went out and knelt in the middle of the field, and nobody could hear what he was saying, and he prayed. I mean, I don't know, he could have been out there, taking a leak for all we know. I mean, come on. Yeah, but as long as he didn't expose himself, who cares? So oh, we got a question. And we're going to grab a cup of Joe. And by the way, it's a lot of work getting those mugs out to you guys, so you better appreciate them and use them every day. All right. There you go. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Bill, got Ken by my side. I figured it out finally. And I'm back. This is Dr. Bill, your Radio MD. How you guys doing? And I'm back. This is Dr. Bill, your Radio MD, and we're doing the second half of the show here. Are you with me, Ken? We got a winner, all right. Yeah, that's a great thing, isn't it? That we can do this and share our really cool mugs with people. And Francis, thanks for listening. We appreciate you. We appreciate everybody out there. By the way, Barry Yee, one of my friends over in China, she posted something to Facebook that she enjoyed one of my shows. So now, our president, or our former president of our homeowners association, JT, he's always teasing me. He said, "Well, go and do your show because I'm sure those two people in the audience are waiting for you breathlessly." but at any rate, so I'm still trying to work out the terms of surrender with the little Korean. But should it be an armed conflict or not, Ken? Okay, well, you know, the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, should I consider myself a free state, or am I actually a captured prisoner? I'm a prisoner. Oh, okay, so I'll give up on that, but that's right. Or I don't, or I will. I can't. I got to. So the Second Amendment, you know, this has come up, last week over this New York thing, where the court said that New York did not have the right to determine who can and who cannot have a carry permit within the limits of their then existing law. And I guess I'll have to rewrite it to make it more palatable to this Supreme Court. But the Second Amendment protects the individual right. This is out of Wikipedia, to keep and bear arms, and the concept of a right existed within English common law as far back as 1689. Did you know that? The English Civil War was in the 1640s and 50s, and that's when the Puritans, with Cromwell as their leader, took over, and they were anti-royalist, and then so the royalists and the Puritans fought each other. Now, it was also a religious war, Ken, because the Puritans were considered low church, and the royalists were Anglicans, and they were considered high church. So they thought of themselves as purer Christians, closer to the original Catholicism, but with their own way of doing things. So that was part of the rub, and so after that, there were a lot of changes. The Crown lost some of its power. There were more rights implemented in the English Bill of Rights in 1689. But guess what? You could only own a gun if you were a Protestant. Yeah. If you were a Catholic, you couldn't own a gun. So, but these things have expanded. In the original Bill of Rights, Second Amendment, when it was enacted, most states had laws that said that if you were in the South, if you were black, you couldn't own a gun. So things have changed, and they've expanded, and the courts have been much more liberal in their interpretation of the Second Amendment. But the idea was that in terms of forming militias rapidly, that we would be able to defend ourselves against foreign invaders and also against an overly intrusive federal government. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, look, the federal government's really not that intrusive, and we have the election process. You're one of these election guys, Ken. And, yeah, and that if you don't like it, then you can go out and get your team to go out and vote and change it. You don't have to fight with the federal government on every issue. Well, that may be true to a certain extent, but it does happen from time to time that governments become totalitarian. I mean, look at Germany. They voted in democratically. They voted in Hitler, and then within 4 or 5 years, he was a dictator. So these things can happen, and I think we can see that with the socio-fascists that we have in power now, that they want to dictate to us not only taxes and traffic laws, but also how we live our lives. So I think that there is a place for it. And the next argument people make is that, look, you cannot resist a federal army with your assault rifles. First of all, militia are notoriously unreliable, and Washington figured this out early on in the Revolutionary War because they'd run away, or they wouldn't stay for their service. They'd agree, okay, we'll come for a year, and then they'd say, well, I got to go home and plow the fields or bring in the crops, and I'll be back. And they may or may not have come back. So militia are notoriously unreliable, and that's why we have a strong federal army. And of course, forming a militia in a hurry is not easy in this day of rapid warfare. And so people say, well, you can't fight the federal government. And even if you have 100,000 guys in your state with guns, they're still going to wipe you out. Let me remind you of what people were saying when the Russians massed on the Ukrainian border. Ukraine can't resist Russia. You know what? Ukraine can resist Russia, and they can get help from outside. And the same thing can happen in the States. And during the Civil War here, the southern states initially were getting help from Great Britain. And the guns that they had were British firearms, a lot of that. So things are not always as they seem. Milk can masquerade as cream. And the ability to stand up to the government and say, no, we're not going to do that, is inherent in our national DNA. And we're not going to give that up easily. We want that right. That should be our right. That's part of the rights of men and women everywhere, in my opinion. That's part. I agree, and you can see that especially in some of the big cities. But surprisingly, you know what state has the highest murder rate? Louisiana. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, I agree 100% with the statistics that the FBI pulled together on that. I couldn't believe I spent 1 month in the emergency room, in the accident room at Charity in New Orleans, which is, like murder capital USA, but they underreport their statistics. So because it had run the tourism industry, and New Orleans depends on tourism. So, but we saw murders left and right. It was just unbelievable. I think. Well, yeah, of course. And Florida has a fairly low murder rate, believe it or not. Fairly low. We're not the lowest in the country, but we're in the probably in the lower, we're in the 20%, lower 20% in terms of murder rate. And murder, and this whole argument of assault rifles and multiple round clips and all that. There's, I think in 2020 or 2019, there were like 30 or 35 mass murders from guns, from rifles. Now, in the debate is, what is a mass murder? Well, the FBI says anybody who picks up a gun and threatens to kill a bunch of people, that's a mass murder, whether he gets away with it or not. Is it one? Is it two? Is it three? But still, we're talking, 30, 35 people? I mean, I'm sorry. I know that if you were one of the people that lost a loved one, you're not going to be happy hearing this, and you're going to want some way to moderate your grief and to ensure that it won't happen in the future to other people. But I think in a society like ours, that's not going to happen. The Second Amendment's not going away, Ken. It is not going away. And if you look at that, let's say there's 340 million people in the United States, and 34 people are killed by assault rifles a year. What percentage of the population is that? It's not 1%. It's not one. Yep. And it's not 1/10 of 1%. It's not 1/100th of 1%. It's not 1/1000th of 1%. It's 1/10,000th of 1% of the population. Is that going to bring the democracy down? I don't think so. I don't think so. Did you answer that phone, Ken? Well, if you want to, go ahead. I'll keep talking until you have something for me. Okay. Oh, God, the captain. Well, that's not true anymore. They're changing it under the Democrats. Well, I'm telling you, I think it should be down to 3. Let's have a debate on that. All right, and don't remember next. Now, remember, Captain, next week we've got free rectal exams, so come on over. All right, buddy. Thank you. So, many in the founding generation believed that governments would use soldiers to oppress the people. Though we really haven't seen that in the United States to any large extent. I mean, there have been some small pockets of this, but overall, we've been fairly trusting of our soldiers, and our soldiers have been respectful and have tried to obey the Constitution. And but the founding fathers came to this because they were being, in their opinion, their minds, their beliefs, they were being oppressed by the English, and the English were putting soldiers into their homes and into their businesses and stepping on them, especially in Boston, where we had the rabble rousers, Sam Adams and John Hancock. So, can it happen again? Yeah, it can happen again. Is it likely to? Probably not. But will owning assault rifles make a difference? Yeah, of course they will, Ken. You stop and think about it. If you're a policeman or a National Guardsman and you're told to go arrest Handelman because he's inciting a revolt, and you know he has a lot of guns and ammo, you're going to think twice about doing that, and especially if you know him. If you say, "Well, look, I see Doc riding his bike down the street here in Gulfport. I'm not going to go over there and get in a gunfight with him. He's not doing anything to me." So I think that there is a psychological deterrent, and I also think that if rebellions do happen, if there are civil wars, that you can get help from outside, just like the Ukrainians and the Afghanis had done, are doing with the Russians. And guess what? The Afghanis beat the Russians. They beat them. Yeah. And the Ukrainians are holding their own. And the military strategists in the West are saying that they don't think that the Russians can last much longer because they're expending all of their military resources. So, well, I think that's a valid argument, but that's one that's been just within the past 60 to 70 years. Did you know that? In the 19th century, the courts were more strict in their interpretation of the Second Amendment and held that you couldn't just own a gun for protection, and that jurisdictions did have the right to step in and say, no guns in our city, but those were different times. And now we're in another phase where crime rates have gone up, although they're actually going down. The height of the crime rate, of the murder rate, was in 1974 when you and I were young pups doing our thing because we were a no good, low down, dirty, rotten bunch of ragamuffins and hippies and left-hand turners, and we were all mad about Vietnam or something. I don't know, but but actually, even though the absolute numbers are going up, the percentage is not. It's actually gone down over the past 50, 60 years, and there might have been a little bit of rise in the past couple of years because of various circumstances, but overall, things have been getting better. We just have so many more people. When I was born, there was, 150, 160 million people in the country, and now there's, 340, roughly. So, and the murder, the absolute number of murders has probably less than doubled since I was born. So, it's a tough argument to make that guns are a good thing to a lot of people, and they say one death is one death too many. I mean, I'm not sure that you can. Are you going to stop death completely? But we'll try. We're trying to, just like we did we're doing with this new immunotherapy for rectal cancer, Ken. We don't want to give up trying, but certainly there's going to be some deaths, and that's understandable. But you can't go up there and protect her. First of all, she's not going to let you. You can't walk around with with a sidearm and be her bodyguard. You could. There's got to be a way. An umbrella. Didn't James Bond have an umbrella that was a rifle? We can figure it out. Yeah, the debate has been going on since the inception of the republic, and they disagreed, the founding fathers, whether an armed populace could adequately deter federal opposition. Well, if you consider the South as anti-federalist, they certainly did it for 4 years, and everybody said you can't win the Civil War. Well, actually, the kill ratio was 3-to-1. For every Southerner that died, 3 Northerners died. So, you tell me who won and who lost. I mean, everybody lost to a certain degree, but certainly the North bled more than the South. And of course, we came out of it stronger. Wars strengthen populations. And it's too bad that it is that way, but that's just the nature of the beast. You're not going to change it, not in the near future. Not until we can manipulate the genetics more, until we breed out all the stupid genes, and then we'll have to breed out all the aggressive genes, and of course we got to stop all of the child abuse and neglect. So, yeah, I think. Can you call Congress and see if I can go up there and be on a committee, be in a committee hearing? Well, I'd love to go there, but Joe might be wandering around lost, pooping in his diaper, and I don't want to have to change him. Okay, all right, get him out first, and I'll come in. But the Second Amendment originally applied only to the federal government, and then it was expanded as the 14th Amendment came in, and states' rights and federal rights meshed more and more, and we had an expansion of the rights of the people to own guns. And Ken, specifically for what you were saying, in the past 20 to 30 years, the courts have said, yeah, people do have a right to own a gun to protect themselves. They do have that right. And they believe that was inherent in what the Founding Fathers had intended. And they made that decision based upon what the Founding Fathers had said and written about the Second Amendment and why they thought it was necessary. So we've got a big debate going on there, and I don't think it's going to be resolved anytime soon, but it's certainly fascinating to see, and to see how we're working our way through it. Okay, so we went through a lot today. You know what? Gun control, the Second Amendment, the 14th Amendment, abortion, when does life begin? You want to know when life begins? Well, I was at this conference and I was debating with one of my Protestant doctor friends and one of my Jewish doctor friends, and I said, I was raised Catholic, and so life, and it makes sense biologically that life begins at the moment of conception. And my Protestant friend says, no, Bill, it's a matter of this baby is a parasite until its umbilical cord is cut. Then it's a living human. My Jewish friend says, you want to know when life begins? I'll tell you when life begins. When the dog dies and the kids move out, then life begins. And that's a true story. I would never lie to you guys. Maybe yeah, let's do. We're doing everything there. We've got echo, ultrasound, do vascular studies, abdominal ultrasounds. I do stress tests, transesophageal echocardiograms. We do general medicine. We cut, we sew, we slice, and we dice. We treat medical problems, and as you can hear, and we are at 727-384-6411. 727-384-6411, and we'd love to have you in the practice. I'm going to see you guys next week. I'm Dr. Bill, your radio MD.